Jake Morrison walked slowly down the long hallway of Crossroads Prime Space Station. His cleaning cart made soft squeaking sounds as it rolled across the shiny floor. The wheels needed oil, but Jake never bothered to ask for new ones. He had been working the night shift as a janitor for 8 years now. 8 long years of cleaning up after people who never noticed he was there. The hallway was quiet tonight. Most of the day workers had gone home hours ago. The diplomats and fancy government people who worked in the Terran embassy were all asleep in their nice quarters. Jake liked it this way. No one bothered him during the night shift. No one asked him to hurry up or move out of the way. He could take his time and do his job right. Jake was 42 years old and not a tall man. His brown hair was getting gray at the sides, and his hands were rough from years of hard work. He wore the same blue uniform every night, with his name tag that said, Jake Morrison, Maintenance. Most people never looked at his name tag. To them, he was just the janitor. He had been married once, back on Earth. His wife Linda had left him 5 years ago. She took their daughter Amy with her. Jake still sent money every month, but Amy was 15 now and barely talked to him when he called. Sometimes Jake wondered if he should have fought harder to keep his family together. But what could he offer them? He was just a janitor on a space station far from Earth. Tonight felt different, though. As Jake cleaned each section, he noticed small things that were not right. An air vent cover was loose in one hallway. Crumbs were scattered near a maintenance door in another section. Someone had been in places where they should not be. Jake had cleaned these halls for 8 years. He knew every corner, every panel, every small detail. When something was out of place, he noticed it right away. Most people would walk past these small signs without seeing them. But Jake was not most people. He paid attention to details. He stopped his cart near Section C7. This was a restricted area near the bottom levels of the embassy. Only people with special permission could come here during the day. At night, it was supposed to be empty except for Jake and his cleaning duties. But tonight, Jake heard something that made him stop and listen carefully. It was very quiet, almost too soft to hear over the normal sounds of the space station. But it was there. A small whimpering sound, like a hurt animal might make. Jake set down his cleaning cloth and walked toward the sound. It seemed to be coming from behind a maintenance panel near the floor. The panel was supposed to be locked, but it was slightly open. Jake knelt down on the cold floor. His knees hurt from all the years of bending and kneeling to clean, but he ignored the pain. He listened again. Yes, there it was. Something was definitely behind the panel, and it sounded hurt and scared. Jake had a choice to make. He could report this to station security right away. That would be the safe thing to do. The right thing to do according to all the rules and regulations. But Jake had learned over the years that sometimes the rules did not care about right and wrong. Sometimes the rules just cared about making life easier for the people in charge. Instead, Jake carefully opened the maintenance panel all the way. He moved very slowly so he would not scare whatever was hiding inside. The space behind the panel was dark, but Jake could see something moving in the shadows. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. There was a child hiding in the narrow space behind the panel. But this was not a human child. The creature had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the dim light from the hallway. Its eyes were much larger than human eyes, and they were dark like deep water. One of its thin arms was pressed against its body in a way that looked very painful. The child looked up at Jake with those huge, frightened eyes. Despite all the rules about not helping unregistered aliens, despite all the warnings about losing his job, Jake felt his heart break. A little bit. This was just a scared, hurt child who needed help. Jake had always been good with children. Before his divorce, He used to read bedtime stories to his daughter Amy. He remembered how to speak softly and move carefully so he would not frighten a scared child. "Hey there, little one," Jake whispered in the gentlest voice he could manage. "Are you hurt?" The alien child did not answer with words, but something in Jake's tone seemed to calm it down a little. The creature's large eyes watched Jake carefully, trying to decide if this strange human was safe or dangerous. Jake slowly reached out his hand, palm up, to show he meant no harm. This was the same way he used to approach stray cats back on Earth when he was a boy. Slow movements, calm voice, and lots of patience. After what felt like a very long time, the alien child reached out with its good arm. Its fingers were longer and thinner than human fingers, but when it touched Jake's hand, he felt something unexpected. There was a warm, tingling feeling where their skin touched, and suddenly Jake could sense the child's emotions: fear, pain, hunger, loneliness, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this human would help instead of hurt. Jake did not understand how he could feel these things from just touching the child's hand, but he understood enough to know that this little creature had been through something terrible. It was running from something bad, and it needed help. "You're running from something," Jake said quietly. "Something that hurt you." The child nodded its head slightly. Even though it could not speak his language, it seemed to understand that. Jake was trying to help. Jake looked around the empty hallway. There was no one else around. The night shift security guards would not come to this section for another 2 hours. Jake had time to make a decision. He could report this to security right away. That would be the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice that would keep him out of trouble. Or he could help a scared, hurt child who had nowhere else to go. Jake Morrison had never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a janitor who cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. But looking at this frightened alien child, Jake realized that sometimes being a hero was not about being strong or brave or important. Sometimes it was just about being kind to someone who needed kindness. He made his choice. "Can you walk?" Jake asked softly. The child struggled to stand up inside the narrow maintenance space. It was hurt and weak, but it managed to get to its feet. Jake helped it climb out of the hiding place, being very careful not to hurt its injured arm. The alien child was small and light, about the size of a human 10-year-old. Its clothes were torn and dirty, but Jake could see they had once been made of fine material with beautiful patterns. This was not some random street child. This creature came from somewhere important, but right now, none of that mattered. Right now, Jake just saw a hurt child who needed help. And Jake Morrison, night shift janitor, was going to help. Jake helped the alien child walk down the quiet hallway toward the service section of the station. The creature moved very slowly, trying not to put weight on one of its legs. Its broken arm hung at a strange angle, and Jake could tell it was in a lot of pain. But the child did not cry or complain. It just followed Jake with those big, dark eyes full of trust. Jake's quarters were not fancy. He lived in a small room in the service section, far away from the important people and their nice offices. It was just one room with a bed, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom. But it was private, and that was what mattered right now. He helped the child sit down on his old couch. The alien looked around the small room with curiosity. It had probably never seen such a simple place. Jake could tell from its torn but expensive clothes that this child came from wealth and importance. "Let me look at that arm," Jake said gently. The child was scared at first. It pulled back when Jake reached toward the injured arm. But Jake moved, very slowly, and spoke in a calm, quiet voice. He had learned patience from years of dealing with broken machines and difficult cleaning jobs. Sometimes the best way to fix something was to take your time and be gentle. Slowly. The alien child began to trust Jake. It let him touch the broken arm and examine the injury. Jake was not a doctor, but he had taken basic first aid classes when he started working on the space station. He knew how to treat simple injuries. The arm was definitely broken. Jake could feel where the bone was not right. It needed to be set properly and held still so it could heal. Jake got his first aid kit from the bathroom. It was not much, just basic supplies for cuts and scrapes. But it would have to do. This might hurt a little, Jake warned as he carefully straightened the broken arm. The alien child made a small sound of pain, but it did not pull away. Jake worked as gently as he could, using strips of cloth to make a splint that would hold the arm in the right position. The child watched everything Jake did with those intelligent eyes. When Jake finished with the arm, he noticed the child was shivering. Its blue skin had become paler, and it was hugging itself with its good arm. Jake realized the creature was cold. The space station was kept at a temperature that was comfortable for humans. But maybe that was too cold for this alien species. Jake got a warm blanket from his bed and wrapped it around the child's shoulders. The alien pulled the blanket closer and seemed to relax a little bit. Its skin became a slightly brighter shade of blue, and the shimmering effect became more noticeable. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked. The child looked at him with a confused expression. It probably did not understand much human language. But when Jake made eating motions with his hands and patted his stomach, the alien nodded eagerly. Jake looked through his small kitchen for something the child might be able to eat. He did not know what alien children could safely eat. Human food might be poison to this creature. But the child looked very hungry, and Jake had to try something. He decided to start with simple things: bread, water, and some fruit. These seemed like safe choices. Jake put small amounts on a plate and offered it to the child. The alien smelled each piece of food carefully before tasting it. It ate very slowly, with careful, polite movements that showed good manners. Even though it was obviously very hungry, it did not grab the food or eat like a wild animal. This child had been taught proper behavior. As the alien ate, Jake got a better look at its appearance. The shimmering in its skin was beautiful, like light dancing on water. Its hair was white and very fine, almost like silk threads. The child's features were delicate and elegant, with high cheekbones and a small nose, but it was the eyes that caught Jake's attention the most. They were not just large and dark. They seemed ancient, like they had seen too much sadness for such a young face. This child had been through something terrible. When the alien finished eating, it looked up at Jake and spoke for the first time. Its voice was musical and clear, even though Jake could tell the creature was very tired. "Thank you," it said in careful, slow human words. Jake was surprised. The child could speak some human language after all. "You're welcome," Jake replied. "What's your name?" The child thought for a moment, as if trying to remember the right human words. "Kira," it said finally. "That's a pretty name." "I'm Jake," he pointed to himself. "Jake Morrison." Kira nodded and tried to repeat the name. "Jake Morrison." The words came out with a strange musical accent, but Jake could understand them. "Where are you from, Kira?" Jake asked gently. Kira's expression became very sad. It looked down at its hands and spoke in a quiet voice. "Home is gone. Bad people came. Family is—" The child struggled to find the right words and made a gesture across its throat. Jake felt his heart sink. This child's family had been killed. Kira was all alone in the galaxy, running from whoever had destroyed its home. No wonder the creature had been hiding in the maintenance tunnels. It had nowhere else to go. "I'm sorry, Kira," Jake said softly. "That must have been very scary." Kira nodded, and Jake could see tears forming in those large, dark eyes. But the child did not cry. It had probably learned that crying was dangerous when you were hiding from enemies. Jake made a decision that would change both their lives. He knew he should report Kira to station security. The rules were very clear about unregistered aliens. Anyone who helped them could go to prison. Jake could lose his job, his home, everything. But looking at this scared, hurt child, Jake found that he did not care about the rules. Some things were more important than following orders. Some things were about being human and doing what was right. Kira, Jake said, you can stay here for a while, until you feel better. The alien child looked up at him with surprise and hope. Stay? Here? Safe? Yes, Jake promised. You're safe here. Whatever you're running from, it can't hurt you while you're with me. Kira's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were happy tears. The child had been alone and scared for so long that Jake's simple kindness felt like a miracle. Jake helped Kira get comfortable on the couch. He gave the child another blanket and a pillow from his bed. Kira curled up under the blankets like a small animal finding shelter from a storm. Sleep now, Jake said gently. You're safe. As Kira's eyes slowly closed, Jake sat in his small kitchen and thought about what he had done. He was hiding an alien refugee in his quarters. If anyone found out, he would be in serious trouble. The station authorities did not like people who broke the rules about alien contact, but Jake had never been good at following rules that seemed wrong. When he was a boy on Earth, he had always brought home stray animals, even when his parents told him not to. He had a soft heart for creatures that needed help. His ex-wife Linda used to say this was one of his problems. She said he cared too much about things that were not his responsibility. Maybe she was right. Maybe that was why she had left him. Maybe caring too much about others was a weakness. But watching Kira sleep peacefully for the first time in who knows how long, Jake decided he did not care if it was a weakness. Sometimes the world needed people who were willing to take risks to help someone in need. Jake had no idea that his simple act of kindness was about to change the course of galactic history. He was just a janitor who saw a hurt child and decided to help. But sometimes the smallest acts of compassion can have the biggest consequences. As Jake settled into his chair to keep watch over his sleeping guest, he had no way of knowing that powerful forces across the galaxy were already searching for the lost alien child sleeping on his couch. Forces that would soon turn his quiet life upside down. For 3 days, Jake managed to keep Kira hidden in his small quarters. It was not easy. He had to be very careful about bringing food without anyone noticing. He had to make sure no one heard voices from his room during the day when Kira was awake and he was supposed to be sleeping. Jake changed his routine to make this work. Instead of eating in the station cafeteria, he bought food from the vending machines and took it back to his room. He told his supervisor that he was not feeling well and wanted to rest during his breaks. Nobody questioned this. Jake had been a good worker for 8 years, and his boss trusted him. During these 3 days, Jake learned more about Kira and the terrible things that had happened to the child's people. Kira's human language was getting better, and the alien was able to tell Jake more of the story. Kira came from a beautiful world called Zephyr, far away from Crossroads Prime. The planet had floating cities in the clouds and crystal forests that sang in the wind. Kira's people were peaceful and had lived there for thousands of years without wars or violence. But then the bad people came. Kira called them the Cleansing Fleet. They believed that the galaxy should belong only to certain types of beings. Anyone who was different had to be eliminated. They came to Zephyr with huge warships and terrible weapons. They said we were impure, Kira explained, struggling with the difficult human words. Said galaxy must be clean of our kind. Must kill all Zephyrians so we cannot make more children. Jake listened to the story with growing horror. What Kira was describing was genocide, the deliberate killing of an entire species. Jake had read about such things in history books, but hearing it from a child who had lived through it made his stomach sick. My family tried to hide me, Kira continued. Put me in secret ship, told me to fly far away, said they would follow later. But they never came. Jake's heart broke for this child. Kira had been forced to watch its entire world die, then spend years hiding and running from the people who wanted to finish the job. No child should have to go through something like that. But Jake was starting to realize that Kira was not just any refugee child. The way Kira spoke about my family and the expensive clothes the child wore suggested something important. When Jake asked about Kira's family, the alien became very quiet and would not give details. Were your parents important people on your world? Jake asked gently. Kira looked scared and shook its head quickly. Cannot say too dangerous? If bad people know, they try harder to find me. Jake did not push for more information. He could see that talking about the family made Kira very upset. But he was starting to suspect that this child was more than just another refugee. There was something special about Kira that made the cleansing fleet want to hunt down one small alien child across the entire galaxy. On the fourth day, Jake's luck ran out. He was getting ready to leave for his night shift when his door chimed. This was very unusual. Nobody ever visited Jake in his quarters. He had no friends on the station, and his supervisor only called him on the communicator. Jake looked at Kira, who had gone very still on the couch. Those big dark eyes were wide with fear. The child had learned to be afraid of unexpected visitors. Hide, Jake whispered, pointing to the bathroom, but there was not enough time. The door chimed again, and then Jake heard a voice that made his blood turn cold. Jake Morrison, this is Chief Peters from Station Security. We need to talk to you right now. Jake's hands were shaking as he touched the door control. Chief Peters was not someone who made social visits. If he was here, it meant serious trouble. Jake opened the door and tried to look normal. Chief Peters stood in the hallway with two security officers. Peters was a tough man with gray hair and hard eyes. He had been keeping order on Crossroads Prime for 15 years, and he did not tolerate people who broke the rules. Mr. Morrison, Peters said in his official voice, we've had some reports of strange activity in your section. Mind if we come in and take a look around? It was not really a question. The security team pushed past Jake into his small room before. He could say anything. Jake's heart was beating so fast, he thought it might explode. It took the officers exactly 10 seconds to spot Kira sitting on the couch, trying to make itself as small as possible under the blankets. Well, well, Peters said, his voice cold and angry. What do we have here? One of the officers immediately pulled out a scanning device and pointed it at Kira. The scanner made beeping sounds as it took readings. Jake watched the officer's face go pale as he looked at the results. Chief, the officer said, his voice shaking, you need to see this. These readings are incredible. I've never seen biological signatures like this before. Peters took the scanner and studied the display. His expression changed from anger to shock to something that looked like fear. Mr. Morrison, Peters said slowly, do you have any idea what you've been hiding here? Jake stepped between the security team and Kira. The child was trembling with fear, and Jake's protective instincts took over. A scared, hurt child who needed help, he said firmly. This is not just any alien child, Peters replied, still staring at the scanner. According to these readings, this creature is from a species that has been extinct for over 10 years. The Zephyrians were completely wiped out in the Purge Wars. Peters looked up at Jake with amazement and growing alarm. If this child is really what I think it is, then you have just created the biggest problem in the history of this station. Jake felt the world spinning around him. What do you mean? The Zephyrians were not just another alien species, Peters explained. They were one of the most advanced civilizations in the Outer Rim. When they were eliminated, it created a power vacuum that led to years of war and chaos. Every government in this sector has been dealing with the aftermath. Peters gestured toward Kira, who was watching the conversation with frightened eyes. If there is a living Zephyrian, especially one that appears to be from the royal bloodline, based on these genetic markers, then every major power in the galaxy is going to want to get their hands on this child. Royal bloodline? Jake repeated. Weakly, before Peters could answer, alarms started blaring throughout the station. The lights changed to emergency red, and Jake could hear running footsteps in the hallways outside. Peters' communicator crackled to life. Chief Peters, report to the command center immediately. We have multiple unknown ships approaching the station at high speed. Peters looked at Jake and Kira with an expression of growing panic. Mr. Morrison, I think your little rescue mission just became a galactic incident. Within minutes, Jake's quarters were filled with security personnel. Kira was gently but firmly taken into protective custody, despite Jake's protests. The child looked back at Jake with terrified eyes as the officers led it away. Wait, Jake called out. Where are you taking Kira? The child will be safe, Peters assured him. But we need to figure out exactly who we're dealing with here. And you, Mr. Morrison, are coming with us. There are a lot of very important people who are going to want to talk to you. As Jake was escorted through the station corridors, he could see that Crossroads Prime was in chaos. Security teams were running everywhere. Emergency lights were flashing. Through the viewports, Jake could see ships approaching the station. More ships than he had ever seen in one place. Chief Peters, Jake said as they walked. What's really happening here? Who is Kira? Peters looked at him with an expression that mixed respect with disbelief. Mr. Morrison, if our scans are correct, you just saved the lost heir to one of the most powerful empires in galactic history. The question now is whether that's going to start a war or prevent one. Jake thought about the scared, hurt child he had found hiding in a maintenance tunnel. The child who just wanted to be safe and have someone care about them. How could one small alien child be so important that entire fleets were racing across space to find them? As they reached the detention area, where Jake would be held until the authorities figured out what to do with him, he realized that his simple act of kindness had consequences far beyond anything he could have imagined. But even knowing what he knew now, even facing the possibility of prison or worse, Jake did not regret helping Kira. Some things were worth the risk. Some things were more important than safety or following rules. Sometimes doing the right thing was the only choice a good person could make. Jake sat in the small holding cell, staring at the metal walls and wondering what would happen to him. He had been there for 6 hours now, and no one would tell him anything. Through the small window in his cell door, he could see security officers running back and forth in the hallway. Everyone looked worried and scared. The alarms had finally stopped blaring, but Jake could still hear unusual sounds throughout the station. Heavy footsteps, machinery being moved, and voices speaking in languages he did not recognize. Something big was happening, and Jake was right in the middle of it. He kept thinking about Kira. Was the child safe? Were the station officials treating Kira kindly, or was the alien child locked up somewhere, scared and alone? Jake wished he could do something to help, but he was trapped in this cell with no idea what was going on. Finally, the cell door opened. Commander Hayes walked in, followed by 2 guards. Jake had seen Commander Hayes around the station before, but they had never spoken. She was in charge of diplomatic relations, which meant she dealt with the important alien visitors who came to Crossroads Prime. Commander Hayes was a woman in her 50s, with silver-gray hair and tired eyes. She looked like someone who had not slept in a very long time. She sat down across from Jake at the small table in the cell. "Mr. Morrison," she began, "I need you to understand how serious this situation has become." Jake leaned forward. "Is Kira okay? That child has been through enough without being locked up somewhere." "The child is being well taken care of," Commander Hayes assured him. "We have our best xenobiologists examining them to make sure they're healthy. But Jake, there's something you need to know about who you've been hiding." She paused and rubbed her tired eyes. "We've run every test we can think of. DNA analysis, genetic mapping, biological scans. There's no doubt about it. That child is not just any Zephyrian refugee." "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "The Zephyrians had a complex royal family system," Commander Hayes explained. "When the Purge Wars began 12 years ago, the cleansing, Fleet specifically targeted the royal family to prevent any future claims to power. They wanted to make sure that no one could ever unite the Zephyrian people again." She looked directly at Jake with serious eyes. "That child you saved, Jake, is not just a refugee. According to our genetic analysis, Kira is a direct descendant of the Zephyrian royal line. In fact, based on the genetic markers we found, Kira appears to be the grandchild of the last emperor of Zephyr." Jake felt like someone had hit him in the stomach. Grandchild of an emperor? The royal family was supposedly completely eliminated during the war, Commander Hayes continued. But somehow, one child survived. That child has been hiding and running for 12 years, probably not even knowing their own importance. Before Jake could fully understand what this meant, the alarm started again. Commander Hayes' communicator buzzed urgently. "Commander Hayes, you need to get to the main conference room immediately. The Zephyrian fleet has arrived." Jake saw Commander Hayes' face go pale. "Zephyrian fleet? But that's impossible. There are no Zephyrians left. Ma'am, there are 37 ships out there, and they're requesting permission to dock. They say they're here for their lost prince." Commander Hayes stood up quickly. "Jake, I need you to come with me." This situation just became much bigger than anyone imagined. Jake was escorted under heavy guard through the station corridors. Everywhere he looked, he saw signs of panic and confusion. Station personnel were running around trying to prepare for something they had never experienced before. Through the viewports, Jake could see an incredible sight. The space around Crossroads Prime was filled with ships unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They were elegant and beautiful, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to shimmer like Kira's skin. But they were also clearly powerful warships, bristling with weapons and energy shields. "Those are Zephyrian vessels," Commander Hayes explained as they walked. "We thought they were all destroyed years ago. Apparently, some of them survived and have been hiding, waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Jake asked. "Waiting for their lost prince to be found," she replied. They reached the main conference room, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. The room was filled with the most amazing beings he had ever seen. They were tall and elegant, with the same shimmering blue skin as Kira, but adult and bearing themselves with unmistakable dignity and power. At the head of the table sat a figure that could only be royalty. He was taller than the others, with skin that seemed to glow with inner light, and eyes that held the wisdom and authority of someone who had ruled an empire. This had to be the emperor that Commander Hayes had mentioned. But when the emperor's gaze fell on Jake, there was something unexpected in those ancient eyes. Instead of anger or suspicion, Jake saw gratitude and something that looked almost like relief. "You are Jake Morrison," the emperor said. His voice was musical like Kira's, but deeper and more commanding. "You are the human who saved my grandchild." Jake felt his knees go weak. Everything Commander Hayes had told him was true. Kira really was royalty, and this impressive being was the child's grandfather. "Your Majesty," Jake said, not sure if that was the right way to address an alien emperor. "I just helped the hurt child. I didn't know ... You did not know that you were saving the heir to the Zephyrian throne," the emperor finished. "You helped my grandchild simply because they needed help. This says much about your character, Jake Morrison." The emperor stood, and every other being in the room immediately rose as well. Jake scrambled to his feet, unsure of what was expected of him. "For 12 years, the emperor said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "we believed our royal line had ended. We thought our people had no future, that our culture and our way of life would die with us." The emperor's eyes never left Jake's face. "We have spent these years gathering our scattered fleets, preparing for a war of vengeance against those who destroyed our world. We had nothing left to live for except the hope of making our enemies pay for what they had done." Jake could hear the pain and anger in the emperor's voice, and he began to understand the magnitude of what had been prevented. "But now," the emperor continued, "because of your kindness to a child you thought was just another refugee, we have something we believed lost forever. We have hope for the future instead of only dreams of revenge." The emperor gestured toward the viewports where the Zephyrian fleet could be seen. "Those ships out there represent the survivors of our people. For 12 years, we have been preparing for a war that would have consumed dozens of worlds and cost billions of lives." He paused, and Jake could see tears forming in the ancient ruler's eyes. "But you, Jake Morrison, have given us back our future. You have given us a reason to build instead of destroy." Jake felt overwhelmed by the weight of what he was hearing. His simple act of helping a scared child had apparently prevented a massive galactic war. How was that possible? "I don't understand," Jake said quietly. "How could helping one child change so much?" The emperor smiled, and the expression transformed his regal features into something warmer and more human. "Because, Jake Morrison, that one child represents the hope of our entire people. With Prince Kieran alive and safe, we no longer need to fight for revenge. We can fight for the future." As Jake tried to process this incredible revelation, he realized that his life as a simple janitor was over forever. Whether he wanted it or not, he had become part of something much larger than himself. The question now was what would happen next, and whether the galaxy was ready for the changes that were coming. The weeks that followed changed Jake's understanding of his place in the universe completely. What had started as a simple act of kindness toward a hurt child had grown into something that affected the entire galaxy. Crossroads Prime became the center of the most important diplomatic negotiations in galactic history. Ships arrived from dozens of different worlds, carrying ambassadors and leaders who wanted to witness what everyone was calling the Morrison Accords, named after the humble janitor whose compassion had prevented a war. Jake found himself at the center of meetings with beings whose names he could not even pronounce. Diplomats from across the galaxy wanted to meet the human who had saved the Zephyrian heir and stopped what would have been the most devastating war in recent history. "This is crazy," Jake told Commander Hayes during one of their regular meetings. "I didn't do anything special. I just helped a kid who was hurt." "That's exactly why it matters so much," Commander Hayes replied. "Jake, do you realize what the galaxy has been watching for? Most species see contact with aliens as either a threat or a chance to gain something for themselves. But you saw a child in need and helped without asking for anything in return." She pointed toward the viewports where ships from many different worlds filled the space around the station. Every one of those ambassadors represents a species that has been waiting to see what humans are really like. They've heard our politicians make speeches and seen our military power, but they've never seen what makes humans truly different. Jake looked out at the gathered fleet, still having trouble believing his small actions had led to all this. What happens now? Now humanity gets a seat at the Galactic Council, Commander Hayes said with a smile. The Zephyrians have officially nominated Earth as mediators and peacekeepers, with full support from their coalition. We're being offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and defense treaties that will secure Earth's position in galactic society for generations. But the most important moment came when Emperor Zen asked for a private meeting with Jake. They met in Jake's quarters, which had been expanded and made more comfortable, though Jake had insisted on keeping things simple. Jake Morrison, the Emperor said, settling into one of the human-sized chairs that had been brought in. My people wish to offer you anything within our power. Wealth beyond imagination, estates on the most beautiful worlds in our empire, a position of honor in our government. Anything you desire. Jake thought about this carefully. The offer was real, and the Emperor's gratitude was genuine. But as he looked around his simple quarters, Jake realized something important about himself. Your Majesty, Jake said finally, I really appreciate the offer, but I think I'd like to keep being a janitor. The Emperor's eyebrows rose in surprise. You would refuse the gratitude of an empire? Not refuse, Jake explained, but I've been thinking about what Commander Hayes said about humans being different. Maybe what makes us different isn't that we're better than other species, but that we find meaning in small things, in helping someone who needs it, in doing honest work, in leaving things a little cleaner than we found them. Jake stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the diverse collection of ships representing dozens of worlds. I liked being a janitor. I liked the night shift, the quiet hallways, the satisfaction of doing a job well. And now, knowing that what I do here might help other species understand humanity better, it feels more important than ever. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, an expression that made his royal features look warmer and more approachable. Perhaps, the Emperor said, this is exactly why the galaxy needs more humans like you, Jake Morrison. 6 months later, Jake was still working the night shift at Crossroads Prime, though his job had changed in many ways. The station had become a major diplomatic center, and Jake found himself cleaning the offices and meeting rooms where representatives from across the galaxy worked to build a more peaceful future. He often met young aliens in the corridors now, children whose families had come to work at the diplomatic facilities. Whenever he found one who seemed lost or scared, Jake would stop his work to help, offering a kind word or simply the comfort of a friendly presence. Word of these small kindnesses spread among the diplomatic community, and visiting ambassadors began to specifically ask to meet the human janitor who saved a prince. Jake became an unofficial ambassador himself, representing not the formal policies of human government, but the everyday compassion that defined humanity at its best. Prince Kiran, now recovered and receiving the education appropriate to a future ruler, visited Jake regularly. The young Zephyrian had learned to speak perfect standard and would often spend hours with Jake, learning about human culture and sharing stories from the Zephyrian homeworld that was slowly being rebuilt. Uncle Jake, Kiran said one evening, using the human term of affection the child had adopted. My grandfather says that when I become emperor, I should remember that the greatest leaders are those who serve others. Jake smiled as he continued, cleaning the corridor where they had first met. Your grandfather is a wise man, kid. Just remember that serving others doesn't always mean ruling them. Sometimes it just means being there when someone needs help. As Jake finished his shift that night, he stopped at the viewport in Section C7, the same spot where he had first heard Kiran's frightened sounds. Now, instead of empty space, the view showed a busy community of ships from dozens of worlds, all working together to build something better. He thought about the strange path that had brought him here, From divorced janitor working alone on the night shift accidental ambassador for his entire species. It was funny how trying to live a simple, quiet life had ended up changing the course of galactic history. But as Jake pushed his cleaning cart down the quiet corridors of Crossroads Prime, preparing to start another night of honest work, he realized that some things had not changed at all. He was still the same person who had seen a hurt child and decided to help, regardless of the consequences. And in a galaxy that was learning to value compassion over conquest, that simple human desire to help others had become the most powerful force for peace the stars had ever known. The Zephyrian Empire was being rebuilt, not as a weapon of war, but as a center of learning and culture. The coalition that had been prepared for revenge was now focused on healing and growth. Trade routes that had been closed for years were opening again. Species that had been enemies were learning to work together, all because one night shift janitor had seen a scared child and decided that rules were less important than kindness. Jake Morrison continued his work, cleaning the halls where the future of the galaxy was being written. He was still just a janitor, but now he understood that there was no such thing as just a janitor. Every job, every person, every small act of kindness had the potential to change the world. As he worked through the night, Jake whistled quietly to himself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to help, new chances to show the galaxy what humanity was really about. And Jake Morrison, night shift janitor and accidental hero, would be ready for whatever came next, armed with nothing more than a mop, a kind heart, and the knowledge that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. The galaxy was a little bit cleaner, a little bit kinder, and a little bit more hopeful than it had been before. And that was exactly the way Jake liked to leave things.